It's a beautiful Sunday afternoon here at the Virginia Tech Dairy Center. I'm out here picking cow classes to use to teach dairy cattle evaluation. It's also the last week of my judging team tryouts, so I want to be sure to get good classes for these kids to judge. So this is pretty cool. A nice long line of jerseys to pick from. Let's see what I can find. So here's a cow I kind of like. I love her rib. She's got a really good udder. She's nice and clean down over the top. I think this is a cow I can work with, build a class around. Now this is another cow I like. She's among the most dairy-like things in the herd. She's got a big wide chest, an awesome rib. She needs to be clipped off. Got a lot of winter hair on her, but really clean down over the top and a very milky udder. I think I can use her. Here's another cow I might use. She's a decent cow. Fairly sound, but not crazy about her rear udder. She could be a third place cow maybe for me. If there are specific things you're trying to teach them, try to find a cow that'll show them that. This heifer's just calved recently. She's a little fat and a little congested in the udder, but she's also a good example of a cow with a soft loin and high pins. We don't have a whole lot of those in our herd, so I'm going to use her. She'll be toward the bottom of the class, but it'll give the kids something good to talk about. And boom, there you go. I've got my first class, Jersey Senior 3-year-old cows. None of them are show cows, but I'm pretty pleased. I've got a top pair for my kids to debate. I've got a easy cow to go on the bottom and a pretty logical third place. It's placeable. There's a decision to make, but there's a right answer. And it's going to be a nice talkable class too. Big light colored cow, got a smooth fat red cow. Going to make a good reasons class. So let's see what else we can find. Here's another example of work with what you've got. We did some crossbreeding research here at Virginia Tech about 10 years ago, and we still have some cows in the herd that have got some brown Swiss blood in them or some Swedish red, and I'll tell you what, they're marked funny sometimes, but some of them aren't bad cows. This is an older cow in the herd. Obviously, she's about 25% brown Swiss, and she's 9 years old, and I'm going to go ahead and use her in a judging class. I'll call her a Holstein. Kids will know she's not, but I can use her. She'll be a second or a third place cow and give them something good to talk about. One other piece of advice, it's wonderful if the cows are halter trained and you've got a beautiful big flat area and lots of people to help lead them. I mean, that's the ideal. And realistically, most of us don't have that most of the time, but that's all right. It's okay to judge them tied up. It's okay to judge them in headlocks. Two things. Make sure that the kids can get back far enough. They've got to be able to get, let's say, 10 feet behind the cows in order to really get a good look at them. Also, make sure that there's some space between the cows. If the cows are side by side, 4 cows, 4 headlocks, those 2 cows in the middle are not going to get a good look. So I know it's not easy to get cows spaced the way you want them to, but headlocks can work fine as long as there's an empty headlock between each cow. One last thing before I call it a day. As you finish up, make sure you go back around and look at your classes together. So go find those 4 cows that you plan to use. If you can't get them side by side, at least go from one and look at her hard, and then go find another one and look at her hard, and make sure those classes are going to work together. It takes an extra little bit of time, but it'll pay off. You don't want any bad surprises when you pull those classes out for the kids to judge. So I hope I've convinced you that it's entirely possible to coach a good dairy judging team using commercial cows on a commercial dairy. But you might want to do it on a little nicer day than I chose to. I think it's time to go home and make something warm for supper. So this is an example of the kind of class that you might pick out of a commercial herd. The cows aren't pretty, but I think it resulted in a really placeable class that I was able to use for judging team tryouts. I had intended to show you that Jersey class that you just saw me pick out, but we judged them a couple of days later, and to be honest, I completely forgot to record them. So here's a Holstein class instead. Here's a video of the class, then individual pictures of the cows, and at the end, how we placed it. I placed this class of Holstein 3-year-olds 1, 4, 3, 2. I started with a pair of good-uddered, straight-lined cows, and I chose 1 over 4 for her advantage in dairiness. 1 is cleaner in the throat and down over the top. She's flatter in the thigh. 1 also has more depth to her rear rib and more spring to her rib than 4. Also, I prefer the flex to 1's hock compared to the straight-legged 4. I grant that 4 is a wider-bodied cow with a smoother fore-udder attachment. 4 places second and over 3 for her advantage in correctness of frame. 4 is tighter in the shoulder and straighter out over the top because she's more level from hooks to pins. Also, 4 stands more comfortably on her rear legs than 3 and is stronger in the pasterns. I admit that 3 is cleaner cut. Finally, 3 places over the stale 2 for her obvious advantage in cleanliness and milkiness of udder. 3 is much cleaner in the rib and flatter in the thigh than 2. Also, 3 has more bloom to her udder with more width and fullness to her front and rear quarters. I grant that 2 is a wider, stronger, deeper-bodied cow, and I really admire her power, but I left her last because she's just too stale and too smooth to place any higher. It is for these reasons I placed this class of Holstein 3-year-old cows 1, 4, 3, 2.